Welcome, fellow humans. Today I want to talk about how planning can backfire. I have always had serious problems with task initiation. I'm not entirely sure why it's so difficult for me, but making myself do a task that my attention doesn't naturally just flow to feels incredibly difficult, like I'm pushing against molasses and I have to force myself to do it. And it feels like a kind of pain. It's clearly not physical pain, so it must be emotional pain. The best term I can use for it is that it's really stressful. But the point is that I often find task initiation to be extremely difficult and unpleasant. But obviously, I need to do a bunch of tasks that my attention doesn't just naturally flock to. In childhood, this was generally homework. In my adult life, it's a whole variety of things, from needing to make a doctor's appointment and pay the bills and cook dinner and all of that sort of stuff. But you just can't get through life only doing the stuff you most feel like doing in the moment. If I lived every day as if it was my last, I would quickly run out of laundry. So I have to make myself do tasks. And in childhood, I found a technique that worked really well for me, and so I would use it a lot. And then I discovered that it had a really severe weakness and caused me a bunch of problems. So I've had to move away from it. So I thought of that technique as kind of a form of trigger. What I would do is I would make a plan that I would do one particular thing, and then when I finished that, I would do the thing that I needed to do, like start my homework. So it might be something like I'm going to watch an episode of a television show I particularly like that's on tonight, and then once it finishes, I'll start my homework. And that worked really well for me. The idea of linking things seems to help because I can start watching television very easily. That's not a hard thing to do. And then once I finish television, it's like doing the homework, or at least starting the homework, is part of the same thing now. So I already have a little bit of momentum to push into it. And I don't have to do that initial forcing myself into it as much. Like, it's still not completely easy, but it's much easier. The problem I ran into is that I found that sometimes I would link it to something that I really thought was going to happen, but then didn't. It might be plans that I made with somebody else, or like it might have been the television show, but it turns out that the television show was canceled that night, or I had the schedule wrong, and so it didn't happen. And then when the trigger for that activity didn't happen, it would completely and utterly throw me and make it vastly more difficult for me to do the task, and I would just feel off for the entire rest of the day. And so, over time, I came to view this technique as a trap. And now I am extremely careful with it because I don't want to use it for anything that isn't really strongly under my control. Because it gives the outside world and random luck and people with good intentions who might need to cancel plans with good reason just too much power to destroy my day and mess up my ability to function. I do still use some other related techniques. I still try to link tasks, and that does help me. For example, every morning I have to deal with some CPAP maintenance after I've woken up to clean it before I can use it again. And so what I've done is I've linked taking care of my CPAP with brushing my teeth. And this works pretty well because they're both short tasks that I do at the same time of day, and I can kind of put them into one task. I can't link things infinitely. I think that this is probably related to the concept of chunking. Chunking is a concept within the realm of working memory, where, for example, if you needed to remember a list of letters and they were V, Q, R, B, W, you're just going to have to likely remember them as random letters, and that's going to be several individual chunks, each letter being one. But if you have to remember the letters HELLO, you're probably not going to remember 5 individual letters. You're probably going to remember hello as one chunk. And if you needed to remember a string of letters that spelled out, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya, then you will either remember it as a chunk of words and then be able to turn it into a bunch of letters, or you might be able to remember it as one chunk as a quote from The Princess Bride. And so chunking is something that people do all the time. It's a natural part of how our brains work, and it's pretty vital. And I think that I can turn multiple tasks into one task for task initiation to the extent that I can chunk them. And my ability to chunk things is kind of limited by how sensible it feels and how many items, you know. So I think that's what's going on with my ability to link one task to another to get around the problem of task initiation. Because I've always been a lot better at continuing a task and moving through a task than I've been at starting a task. It can still be difficult to hold my attention on a task, but it's much, much easier than getting started in the first place. So that's the little technique that I used to use and the trap that I found it to be, which is why I don't recommend it to other people unless they're very careful about how they use it. And I hope you found it interesting. That's my story. And if you liked it, please click like. And if you know someone who might find it interesting, please share it. If you'd like more similar content, then subscribe. But most of all, if you have had any similar experiences or good, better techniques for working with task initiation or questions, I would love to read your comments. Thank you.